I was an overserved student, and I think it's just easier to point out, it's easier to see otherness than it is to maybe see yourself.
And when you say yourself, what do you mean as opposed to otherness?
Like, I was, well, I mean, for example, I'm white, and
Okay.
I was a visual learner. I could sit there and I had a good attention span when growing up K through 12. Like, it was easy for me to sit and learn the way that teachers wanted me to, or needed me to, or expected me to. So in that way, because I fit into the way the system was designed, it was easy for me. You know, I was better served by it because I fit what they wanted, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did that take time for you to come to that conclusion or to identify that privilege or being overserved?
Absolutely. Definitely not something I figured out until I was in my 20s, and I even learned so much at the last forum because I was homeschooled most of my education.
Uh-huh.
So much of what we talked about last time, I had no idea about. I didn't know what IB classes were. I didn't know what SPAN classes were. Like, it was completely new information for me. It really opened my eyes to just how privileged I was in my education.
Okay, so anybody else, why is it easy for us to point out the minuses instead of the pluses? Like, we're right there? Yes? Yes, your hand.
Because I'm not sure there is such a concept as overserved.
Why?
Because it sets up a kind of zero-sum game that's not going to help us very much when we think about dealing with underserved students. I think what's really important, I think students who are experiencing a bountiful education are served, and everyone should be served in that possible way. And I think it's not going to work to think what we have to do is to have some less good buildings here so we can have better buildings there, that everyone should have a real bounty of resources, and kids deserve to be served, and it's hard to think of them as being overserved.
So do you think that bringing kids who are underserved back to basically to a zero, to being served as anybody else would, don't you think we would have to decrease privilege or make it come back to an equilibrium?
I think you're conflating privilege and what kids get in schools. I'm not saying that they're not related, but I'd really like to see an example of a kid who is overserved in schools.
Example, a young white man rapes a woman behind a dumpster and gets no time in jail. A young man of color commits an act of maybe selling, a half pound or several ounces of weed and gets 10 years in jail. Now, I may be, again, correct me if I'm wrong, what I'm saying is, at some point, there's no math to it to say like, hey, this is the justice line, this is where you need to be, held accountable. But at one point, you may say that act is very egregious and deserves to be punished as such. This act is not as egregious and is getting a higher punishment than the other punishment. And I can break it down to maybe a white kid gets suspended or not suspended for the same act that a black kid would get suspended for. Wouldn't you think that if this is the equilibrium, two kids commit the same act, a white kid gets no punishment, and a black kid gets a deep punishment, doesn't there have to be some type of evening out, or am I still conflating that?
Totally. I teach in prisons, there's definitely injustice, I think, and write a lot about the school-to-prison nexus or pipeline, but I really think that you are conflating what it means to serve kids in education versus the egregious injustice and profiling that happens to students, especially students of color, in our schools. But it seems to me that it's about apples and oranges. The reason why some kids are profiled, the reason why justice is meted out unfairly is not just a resource issue.
Okay, I wasn't saying it was a resource issue. Is just to clarify that as well. I'm asking, the whole idea, can you overserve a student? Like that, and what I read from you, or what you said, is that there is no overserving. It's just we don't need to lessen somebody's building to bring somebody's building up.
What's your definition of overserve?
It's a great question. My definition of overserve would probably be what that person just spoke about, to not have to identify with the wind at your back until you're in your 20s. That would be my definition. My reverse definition of that would be getting pulled over in the 3rd grade for walking home and being black. That would be my inverse of it. So the idea, to bring context to what you're saying, is the disparity that exists, or in the history of white supremacy that exists in this country, can one feel it at a very, very early on age who isn't white, and is the benefit of being white, or the benefit or the fruits of white supremacy, not having to address it until you're maybe 20, or even when you're in the grave. That would be my approach to that, or my quandary with that, is why should some students have to understand that disparity going into school, as opposed to, I'm in my 20s now, and I'm looking back and thinking, wow, that was really, there was a wild gap there. Did somebody have the mic? Yeah, go ahead.